sound effects for the crash.
Is because it's late on in the month and it's Thursday, that means that this evening in the village, in the parish house, is the Wee Playhouse. It meets once a month, and the oldest continuous play reading group in the country, maybe in the world, and you should check it out before we watch them tonight. Today we're very happy to have Wakoh Shannon Hickey, who is Assistant Professor of Religious Studies in the Division of Human Studies at Alfred University, and she is going to present her students and give a talk in a presentation on roots and roots, right? Or roots and rabbits.
Yes. Thank you. I have to change glasses. So, how's the sound? You okay? Not good. Not good? Not louder. Does it need to be louder? Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Still louder? How's that? Better? Okay. So thanks for coming today, and thanks to Dr. Westacott for this opportunity. I'm here today to celebrate the creativity of Alfred students. Pretty soon you'll be hearing from 2 students who are here with me today, but let me just briefly introduce them to you. Andrea Finch is a junior in History and Communication Studies, and Emily Stoddard is a sophomore in Fine Arts and an honors student. So I'm Wakoh Shannon Hickey, currently the only person teaching religious studies at Alfred University. I have a kind of an unusually broad background, so I teach a very wide range of courses: world religions, Asian religions, Buddhism, Christianity, the Bible, religion and science, women in religion, and American religious history. For most of our time today, I'm going to show you some really interesting projects that students did in my American religious history courses last year and the year before. But before we do, I want to tell you very briefly about a project some of my current students are doing right now, which you might have noticed on your way in. And I want to invite you all to participate. The 9 women in my Women in Religion course this semester have launched a campaign on campus and in the community to promote awareness and appreciation of diversity. And we were inspired in this in part by Virginia Rasmussen, Wayne, Virginia. And the campaign is called Who Needs Equality? So are the women in the class here? Would you stand and say hello? Thank you very much. So here's a little video that they did about their campaign. Buffering. Still buffering. We did a test run. Let me try to reload. We'll give it a minute. What they're doing is they're asking people to complete the sentence, I need equality because, and photographing people with their answers, anonymously or not. And they're posting the pictures to a Tumblr feed. They'll be adding terms of the week to the feed to educate and encourage people to think critically about structural inequality. These are terms they've learned in class, like hermeneutic of suspicion, androcentrism, reflexivity, privilege, and so on. The campaign will continue beyond the end of this semester. Students will be collecting submissions in Powell this week and at Hot Dog Day, so look for their booth. So for taking what they've learned in the classroom out into the community, would you please give them a hand? So Haley will give you a couple of minutes here to see if the buffering continues. Let me just try if I stop it. What if we do this? Try one more time. Doesn't look like it's going to run. It worked perfectly in the test. Oh, there we go.
I need equality because I shouldn't be considered less moral because I don't follow a specific religion. I need equality because I'm sick of people judging me for the size of my butt rather than for my intelligence.
I need equality because popular music that expresses women as being merely sex symbols should not be condoned, let alone profited from.
I do. I do. I do.
Okay. Also, some of the students in my Asian religions class this semester are making sculptures, collages, jewelry, diagrams, and so forth to illustrate what they've learned. Students in my Buddhism class also do sculptures and other kinds of creative projects as part of their work. They've illustrated Buddhist ideas in ceramics, glass, music, dance, sculpture, posters, a board game, and other media. And while I am acknowledging students today, let me just mention two of them to you also. Lauren Rogers and Julian Gisotti. Lauren, are you here? I edit an academic journal called Buddhist Christian Studies, and this year's volume just went to press with articles by these two AU undergraduates. The journal focuses this year on efforts to incorporate contemplative practices into academic classrooms to promote reflexivity and holistic learning. Lauren and Jillian both reflected on what the experience of meditation helped them learn both about Buddhism and about themselves. And so they deserve a round of applause for getting some articles published as undergraduates. And Lauren is also a winner of this year's Comparative Cultures Award and took the lead on the Who Needs Equality project. The most fun thing about teaching at Alfred has been learning from my students about how to create opportunities for them to express what they've learned in a variety of ways. It's fun for them, it's fun for me, and it's good for all of our learning. For the rest of today's forum, we're going to focus on some projects that my students did in American religious history. In 2011, I gave a paper about these projects to the largest religious studies conference in the world, the American Academy of Religion annual meeting. It draws about 10,000 scholars. I was on a panel talking about how to integrate new technologies into courses on religious studies. The other panelists had done some interesting things, and one class had experimented with making annotated Google Maps. But I got to tell you, when I got up and showed the audience what Alfred students had done, it was all over. The AU students completely blew everybody else out of the water. So we're fortunate to have a lot of very talented students here with a lot of really good ideas. They come up with all kinds of things that I would never have thought of. And we're about to see some amazing art during senior shows at the School of Art and Design, but lots of students who wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as artists also do really interesting things when they're given opportunities to demonstrate what they know in methods other than tests and papers. They amaze and delight me again and again. In my lower division general education survey courses, some of the students who enroll do so because the class fits their schedules and they see themselves as checking off a box on their to-do list for graduation. Some students take multiple courses with me, but for most it's likely to be the only course in religious studies they take. Many of my students describe themselves as non-religious, although some were raised Catholic or Protestant. And students who take a course primarily to satisfy a requirement don't necessarily have a strong internal motivation to do the work. A survey of American religious history is particularly challenging because plenty of students, including me when I was in college, expect history to be a bunch of names and dates that they have to memorize. Boring. So students need to see how American religious history is relevant to their own lives, especially if they aren't religious. Another challenge is that religion in America is incredibly complex and diverse, and it's very difficult to do justice to the past 400 or 500 years of it in a 15-week survey. But religious studies is an important part of liberal education because the United States is the most religiously diverse and one of the most religious countries on the planet. And unfortunately, religious misunderstanding, misinformation, and violence are all too common. So my biggest challenge is how to draw them in and get them interested. In order to bring the subject home to students literally, I asked them to trace their own family's religious heritage back at least 4 generations to their great-great-grandparents. They begin by interviewing relatives. I also asked them to do additional research using genealogy databases, public records, and so forth to fill in the gaps. I then invite them to depict this religious family tree in any visual medium they want. Drawing, painting, sculpture, collage, live plants, whatever they like. Some students make simple diagrams by hand or with online genealogy programs. Others are remarkably inventive. In a few moments, I'll be showing you some examples of trees made in the spring of 2011 when Andrea took the class. Emily took it last year, she said. I also asked my students to create maps showing their ancestors' movements both to the U.S. and within the United States because immigration and migration, whether voluntary or forced, are such important themes in American religious history. How and when did their ancestors arrive in the continental U.S.? How did they come to live where they do today? Where did important events in the family history occur? Finally, I asked students to write a short paper explaining what they discovered and how their personal histories reflect larger trends in American religious history. So, for example, if a student's ancestors came from Italy during the late 19th century, they arrived with a huge wave of Catholic immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe who passed through Ellis Island at that time. They may have lived in tenements on Manhattan's Lower East Side, faced anti-Catholic violence, contributed to the development of Catholic schools. If a student's ancestors were Ashkenazi Jews who immigrated during the same period, they may have struggled to preserve Eastern European Orthodox traditions or decided to join the growing Reform movement led by Rabbi Isaac Meyer Wise. If they were slaves, they may have been part of the Great Migration from the rural South to the urban North after the Civil War. They may have helped to bring Southern revivalism to more conservative northern congregations. Some may have joined frontier Baptist congregations or Methodist groups served by preachers who rode huge circuits on horseback and distributed religious literature from their saddlebags. Students who grow up along the path of the Erie Canal could find Dutch Reformed pastors, French Huguenots, Mormons, Christian Scientists, Shakers, Theosophists, Spiritualists, or Mennonites among their relatives. If their ancestors were Mormon or Native American, they may have been persecuted and driven off their land repeatedly. Many students in rural New York have relatives who are evangelical Protestants, some of whom are fundamentalist. Students are consistently surprised by what they discover about their families. When they encounter gaps in available information or non-religious relatives, I ask them to consider what these absences reveal. Do they reflect larger American patterns of mobility, religious choice, discrimination, or persecution? Even the most non-religious family is affected in some way by the issues that we talk about in class. To help students develop their project, I teamed up with 2 librarians and a specialist in geographic information systems. Lori McFadden, you're here. Would you raise your hand? Brian Sullivan, I saw you here. And Justin Grigg. Is Justin here? Brian has a background in religious studies, so he can help students find print and digital reference tools that will help them when they're writing their papers. Lori, our university archivist, created several pages on the library's website providing information and links to genealogical databases. Some of the tabs she created on this page say, for beginners, vital records, state and local, immigration, etc. Here's a detail of the top 10 resources tab that she made. And I'll explain Justin's role in just a minute. Some of the more popular genealogy websites are free and some require subscriptions. I needed to understand how they worked, so I did the assignment along with my students. Here's my Ancestry.com tree, which also, Ancestry.com also owns genealogy.com. For each person, you can add specific details, including religious affiliations, marriages, children, and so forth. I found great-great-great-great-grandparents who came to the colonies before the American Revolution, and I learned about an uncle no one had ever mentioned. Using tools like these, students can get to immigration records from Ellis Island, census records, birth, death, and marriage records, military records held by the National Archives. The number of resources available is astonishing and growing rapidly. Justin, our new mayor, and our resident expert on geographic information systems, taught students a couple of ways to map people's movements. The most common method was to create a customized Google map for this part of the project. Here's one created by Zach Kudla, whose ancestors came to the U.S. from Italy, Russia, the current Czech Republic, England, Ireland, and Quebec. Here's a closer view of that map. Another student, William Horton. William, are you here? No. Ah, there he is in the back row. He had ancestors from Barbados. They belonged to the Church of England but converted to Roman Catholicism and later to Pentecostalism in the United States. His great-great-grandmother was a slave on a sugar plantation and was sold to someone in Florida. William faced a number of problems during this project that are fairly common. He had no contact with one side of his family. His maternal grandmother had Alzheimer's, and he could find no records of relatives who were enslaved. He worked around these problems by writing about how slavery and missionary activity shaped religious life in Barbados. Here's a detail of William's map showing where in Brooklyn his great-great-grandparents became naturalized citizens. Here's a close-up of another map made of satellite images. It shows Ellis Island, where Peter Tarasci's Italian Catholic great-grandfather arrived in 1904. One student went a bit further and created a three-dimensional virtual tour using Google Earth. Okay, so there we go. Saidia's family are Mouride Sufis from Senegal, and her parents lived near the Touba Mosque, so she began her tour there. So I'll zoom in a little closer. Okay, so from there, she identified various places that her family had lived in Senegal. For example, that was her father's house. The airport from which they left Senegal to come to the United States. Right, here's JFK. She highlighted various places that her family had lived in New York. The Arabic school where she studied when she was younger, before she came to college. Right, and she concluded with her dorm on the Alfred University campus. So we're flying now to Oppenheim. Pretty cool, huh? So, other students made paintings of their family trees and maps. So this one is actually on the wall over here. Caitlin Langendorf depicted her Catholic ancestors and her map in a quilt, which is on this wall. I think I might have seen Caitlin come in. Are you here? Yes, Caitlin is here. Here's a close-up. Her paper talked about tensions between Irish Catholics, many of whom wanted to assimilate, and Italian Catholics who wanted to preserve their ethnic traditions. Neither group was considered white when they began arriving in large numbers, so they faced considerable hostility from other European Americans as well as from African Americans with whom they competed for low-wage jobs. This student, Ellie Lampkin, had family photos and a family tree diagram on the front of a piece of poster board, and on the reverse included copies of baptismal certificates, a merit certificate, and more detailed maps. And that's actually in front of me here at the base of the podium. Acacia Swinton made a mobile. Eddie Udoyan, who is a Christian from Nigeria, made a map in the shape of Nigeria with markers indicating where his relatives lived. And that is actually, that tree is up here. He used tree branches to show his genealogy. Ethnically, Eddie is Ibibio. His family's been Christian for several generations, Methodist, African Orthodox, and now Pentecostal. One polygamous ancestor was converted by his Christian wives. In addition to stories about his family, Eddie's paper discussed the history of Christianity in Nigeria. Lauren made her own tree out of cardboard with paper leaves for each family member, and that tree is also here up front. Her ancestors were Baptist and Catholic, but her mother converted to Soka Gakkai, a form of Buddhism originating in Japan, so Lauren was raised Buddhist. Rosemary painted her map, but she took the tree part of the assignment literally. She attached little tags to the branches for each of her relatives. The tree is now planted in my front yard. I'm hoping it will recover from a deer attack this winter. Rosemary learned that some of her ancestors had been Black Dutch, Native Americans who sometimes tried to pass as white. Pretty soon you'll be hearing from Andrea Finch about her project. She figured out that some of her ancestors were English Puritans. One of them came to North America on the Arbella, the flagship of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, in 1630. In 1888, Andrea's ancestors helped to found and build the local Baptist church in Farmersville Station, the village where Andrea grew up. Although she wasn't sure when her ancestors had become Baptist, she knew that some Puritans did, like Roger Williams, who founded Rhode Island, which was the first colony with a strict separation between church and state. Andrea knew as well that the part of New York where she grew up, this part of New York that we're in, was called the Burned Over District because of Christian revivalism that spread like wildfire here during the early 19th century, producing dramatic growth among Baptists and Methodists. So although she didn't know exactly how her family became Baptist, she could make some educated guesses. She'll show you the scrapbook that she made to show her findings. She's holding it up there for you. You'll also hear from Emily, who got her family involved in the research and carried it well beyond the end of the course. For me, the most satisfying part of the project is that students report over and over that they learned things they never knew about their families. Some things are painful. How parents disowned children who married outside the family religion. How broken family relationships and the legacies of slavery can erase one's sense of personal history. How tragic losses led some relatives to abandon their religious beliefs or even commit suicide. Other lessons are happier. Some gain a new sense of family pride. Some are amazed to discover members of religious minorities in their family trees. Christian Scientists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, spiritualists, even Amish. Western New York's religious history is an incredibly rich mix. Some students develop a better sense of their hometowns. They see churches they've driven past 1,000 times in a new light. Now they know something about the differences between the Presbyterian one and the Methodist one and the Episcopal one and the Baptist one and the Catholic one. The project has several strengths. First, it helps make history personal. It gets students talking to their families about their families. It draws on different kinds of skills, visual and kinesthetic, as well as reading and writing. It makes use of technologies students know. And most tell me it's a lot of fun. Among the biggest challenges are family issues that make information gathering more difficult. Estrangements, memory losses, or deaths among elderly relatives, histories of adoption, recent immigration, tenuous connections to places of origin, limited information about ancestors overseas, etc. These just have to be handled case by case and adjustments made as needed. It was good to work with librarians in helping students overcome some of these hurdles because they could give students additional help in learning how to use the research tools. The other big challenge is encouraging students to keep up with the reading. This is a particular challenge with students who are just new to college, but they can't see how their family histories fit into larger trends if they don't understand the larger trends. So I do my best to give students clear written instructions for every part of the project, regular benchmarks and deadlines so they don't wait till the last minute, and encouragement to persist when they run into difficulty, and compassion when they face painful family dynamics. They get lots of creative freedom to approach the project in different ways. The originality and enthusiasm that many of them demonstrate make the course memorable, and learning as personal and enjoyable. The results can make students, faculty, and family members very proud. So if anybody in the audience is interested in taking the class, actually, I'm teaching it again in the fall. So now let me turn the mic over first to Andrea and then to Emily. So please join me in giving them a very warm welcome.
Afternoon. All right, so I took Dr. Hickey's Introduction to American Religion class second semester of my freshman year. At that point in time, her class was the most challenging class I had taken here at AU. I was eager to take this class because I was looking forward to obtain a better understanding of my family's religion. I was raised going to the local Baptist church in Farmersville, New York. Farmersville is 50 miles south of Buffalo. It's located between Franklinville Arcade and Rushford. If you blink while driving through it, you'll definitely miss it. Through Dr. Hickey's Family Tree Project, I was able to trace my family roots back 16 generations. Through my research, I discovered that my ancestor, John Finch Sr., was the first Finch to migrate to the United States. He belonged to a titled family in England that was active in government. He and his family came over on the Arbella in 1630, the first Puritan members of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In class, we read the famous sermon, A Model of Christian Charity, by John Winthrop, the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Winthrop told Puritan colonists that their new colony would be as a city upon a hill. He was quoting the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 14 through 16, which say, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden." Winthrop was telling his people that they would be examples to the whole world of Christian living and good citizenship. This line is often quoted in political speeches, including Ronald Reagan's farewell address in 1989. When I first read the sermon, I did not fully understand it. I met with Dr. Hickey to talk about this project, and she advised me to reread the sermon and think about how it related to my family history. I then figured out that it related to John Finch Sr. and that he must have heard the sermon when he came over on the Arbella. I traced my family's migrations from Massachusetts to Connecticut to Western New York. I don't know exactly how they became Baptists, but there were a lot of Baptist revivals in Western New York during the 19th century. Here's a detail of the map. And this is Farmersville and Freedom, so close-up of Western New York. The Farmersville Station Baptist Church was organized and founded on February 14th of 1888. The church was largely modeled after the Baptist Church in Freedom, New York, which was a booming Welsh community. There were 9 founding members of the Farmersville Baptist Church, including my great-great-great-grandpa on both sides. My great-great-great-grandfather, William Charles, served as the first deacon of Farmersville Church and also kept church records. His wife, Martha Ellen James Charles, served as the church clerk and taught Sunday school service lessons in Rushford Baptist Church for some time. Their daughter, my great-grandma Nellie, played the organ in the church for the church and was also a founding member of the Women's Philathea class, which existed from 1916 through 1973. Both my grandmother, Patricia Vickman Sampson, and my granny, Janet Brzee Finch, they're here. Wave. Hi, guys. They attended the meetings in their younger years. My grandma and Grandpa Sampson, they're both here as well, were married in the church in 1955. My sisters and I, Lindsay's here, the other one's taking state tests, we grew up going to Sunday school class there every Sunday. I was also baptized through the church on my 13th birthday. My family also has ties to the Farmersville Methodist Church. On the lawn up to the farm, we have the church's cornerstone. As you can see, what it says is M.E. Methodist Episcopal Church, 1901. I discovered this last spring as I was just moseying about my day up to the farm, and once I noticed it, I ran up to the house and I said, "Granny, what the heck is that?" And she informed me that it was the old cornerstone of the church. I thought this was extremely cool because not only did I have relatives who helped with the founding of the Baptist church, but I just have the Methodist church's cornerstone hanging out on my lawn. Not many kids can say that. My great-great-grandfather, William Charles, served in the Civil War, as did several other of my relatives. I must give credit to Lindsay Finch, for finding this information in a research for her high school family tree project. William Charles also served for 3 years in the 105th New York Voluntary Infantry. He wrote at least 100 letters home to his wife. And here's an example of just one. My Gramps now has all these letters, and I have got to hold a bunch of them. This is just another benefit of the project because not many can say the same. Another of my relatives died in the explosion of the SS Sultana steamship on April 27, 1865. This tragic event was overshadowed by the press because of John Wilkes Booth's assassination the day before. To this day, this project has been my favorite assignment. I was able to hear stories from my grandparents about our little town and what it used to be like in its glory days, and how much it's changed over the years. Like my house, for example. My home has been in the family since 1886. It was originally a two-family home, and my great-great-great-grandparents on both sides both lived in the house for the same time, for a year. We also had a small general store being run out of the house for some time. Later on, it was converted into a single-family home. My great-grandma Nora was born in this house, and she also had her 2 children in the house as well. So they were born and raised there, my Gramps and my Aunt Joyce. From both sides of the family, I am the 4th generation to be raised on a farm. For my project, I decided to make the scrapbook because I knew that I'd be able to professionally and creatively preserve my research. This is something that I can share easily. I can also add more into it, and I can pass it down as a family heirloom. It was easy for me to gather all of my information because my Gramps, Jack Finch, had a genealogy report done on the Finch family a number of years ago. And here's over there a map of what the tree looks like and how it extends. My granny has boxes of old pictures of the town and past relatives. There are also old newspaper clippings included in the boxes, but mainly lots of old pictures, which I absolutely love. I'm grateful and fortunate enough to have both sets of grandparents who are able to pass down such valuable information while still in good health. I also used Ancestry.com to help me organize my family tree. I am extremely pleased and grateful that I made this project so personal and went above and beyond the requirements, because these are all facts that I would never known or possibly even cared about if it wasn't for this assignment. I have learned an enormous amount from this project. I was able to gain a better understanding of Baptists and their beliefs. I also learned about my little town and what it used to be like. I would like to thank Dr. Hickey for creating this project. Her course was challenging but yet very enjoyable. I have yet to take another class similar to this. I am proud to be able to stand up here and share my rich family history in town with all of you. Thank you again, Dr. Hickey, for believing in me and featuring my work in the Religious Studies Conference in 2011. I'm truly honored. At this time, I'd like to give Dr. Hickey some recognition for all of her hard work and enthusiasm. Now, I would like you to please welcome Emily Straughter to the stand.
That's me.
everybody. My name is Emily Stoddard, and I completed the Family Religious History project in Dr. Hickey's Religion in America class in the fall of my freshman year. I'm currently a sophomore art and design student. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to discuss where the research I did for this class has taken my family and me since the end of the project. When I signed up for the class, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It turned out to be one of the most rigorous courses I had taken up to that point, and I had to learn to think in a completely different way. Dr. Hickey was probably one of very few teachers I had ever had who pushed me to think critically and analytically, and it definitely made me realize that this is my education, and it's time to take full responsibility for my work. This is why I enjoyed the final assignment so much. Of course, as an art student, I liked the fact that the project allowed for so much creativity. What really pushed me through, though, was the treasure hunt process of digging through, and I mean literally digging, through boxes of old family documents, photos, certificates, etc., as well as using resources like Ancestry.com and making connections and discoveries that no one in my family had bothered to do before me. I was lucky because at the beginning of the project, when I first called my mom to tell her about it, she told me that a woman in my family had compiled a bunch of names and dates and such during the 1970s that she had copied and given to all the living relatives on her side of the family. It was a good starting point, but it had absolutely zero information about anyone's religious affiliations, so I had to do some research on my own. My favorite part was talking to my aunts and uncles and great-aunts and uncles about their lives. This is my great-aunt Doris. I do not have any living grandparents, but my grandmother's sister actually got very excited when she found out that I was doing the project and invited me over to look through all of her boxes of jumbled up papers and photos. She told me story after story about her 3 sisters and her parents who she loved and adored, and I realized that for her this was an opportunity to reminisce and to keep her family's memories alive. She is in her mid-80s, but she is still full of spirit, and her attitude is as sharp as ever. She asked my mom and me to drive her out to a few cemeteries where her parents and grandparents were buried, and she told me that she was so glad I was doing this project, because otherwise she would never have been able to get back out to any of the sites that we visited. I felt that she was entrusting me with all of her stories and memories so that they would not disappear, and I took it as an honor to be the one responsible for preserving them. As far as the religious history goes, I found out that my mother's relatives came from Prussia to America in 1858 and settled in Nebraska on a plot of land granted to them by the government in exchange for military service. At that time, they were most likely Lutheran, but were definitely Protestant. That was 6 generations ago, and for the most part, the ones that were religious at all were affiliated with Baptist churches, married and baptized by Baptist pastors, and buried with Baptist services. My immediate family attends a Baptist church in Syracuse, New York. My dad's family was a bit more complicated. Almost no photos or documents remain, or at least that anyone was willing to share with me. Much of what we know about his family is made up of contradicting stories, family drama, and secrets, probably like any family. I was always told that the Stoddards were Scottish, but once I started researching, no one could actually produce any type of document confirming this. The only religious information that was available was my father and his siblings' baptism certificates from a Methodist church in Syracuse, New York. Anyone I asked said that they never remembered actually attending church, and no one, including my dad, is at all religious. My parents actually got really into helping me with this part of the project because they had no idea why there was so little information either. And last summer, my family went on several day trips to look for the graves of my great-grandparents. I guess the most interesting bit was not knowing and trying to fit the puzzle pieces together in a way that might make sense. One thing that was particularly rewarding for me was finding that there had been a baby born to my great-grandmother that died in infancy. We found records of this death through the cemetery at the time of the burial, but looking at the most recent records of the same cemetery, The child's plot is not accounted for, and there is no marker on the grave. This was disturbing, to say the least, but I was glad that I knew. It was at least comforting to know that the baby that had been erased from the books, presumably because it had been an illegitimate child, was discovered, whether it was still buried there or not. I asked relatives about it, and they simply refused to tell me anything. This definitely made me think about the religious as well as societal obligations of the time period that might have caused this. If they were religious, and presumably they were to an extent, a child born without a father would have been extremely controversial, and they would have wanted to keep it a secret. All in all, this project actually had a very sentimental effect on myself as well as my family. It put the course on American religion into context that made sense to me, and was the beginning of what has now become a year-long investigation into our past that is still continuing. One thing that Dr. Hickey emphasized throughout the class was that it wasn't about the material as much as it was about the learning skills that were developed in the process. This project definitely brought this into perspective for me, and has helped me shape my mindset for the rest of my career as a student. It is satisfying knowing that even after 6 generations, my family is still functioning in much the same way that it has in the past, and I'm looking forward to another summer spent with my family looking for the places and the people that got me to where I am now. So thank you. I guess we'll open it up to any questions or comments that you have.